Buried beneath Machu Picchu, the discovery no one saw coming. 8,000 feet above sea level, wedged between two Andean peaks, there is a wall that has outlived every empire that came after the people who built it. Put your hand on it. There is no mortar. There is no gap. A blade of grass will not slide between the stones. And for over 100 years, the question that has quietly haunted every engineer who has studied it has never really been answered. How did a civilization with no iron tools, no wheel, and no written language cut granite blocks weighing as much as a city bus and fit them together with a precision we still struggle to match with modern machinery? That question is what this video is actually about. Not aliens. Not a lost super-civilization. Something better, because it's real. The true, verified story of what lies beneath Machu Picchu and why the deeper archaeologists dig, the more astonishing the real engineering turns out to be. Machu Picchu was built in the mid-1400s, most likely under the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, as a royal estate and religious center. That much is settled and well documented through radiocarbon dating, colonial records, and decades of excavation. But settled doesn't mean simple. The story that rarely makes it into the postcards is what's underneath the postcard view, an engineering system so advanced that modern hydrologists and structural engineers still travel to Peru just to study it. This is the part of Machu Picchu that most visitors walk over without ever knowing it exists, and it's the part that actually deserves the word discovery, because unlike the myths that circulate online, this is real, it's documented, and it's honestly more impressive than fiction. Let's start with the stones themselves, because this is where every version of the story, real or exaggerated, begins. The finest walls at Machu Picchu, the ones tourists press their palms against in the Temple of the Sun and along the royal residences, are built in a technique called ashlar masonry. Each block was shaped individually to interlock with its neighbors on every side, not just top and bottom but along irregular, multi-angled faces, some with as many as a dozen distinct surfaces. The joints are frequently so tight that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. For decades, this was treated as a curiosity, a display of patience. It is only in the last generation, as structural engineers began applying seismic modeling to these walls, that the true purpose became clear. This region sits on an active fault system in the Andes, one of the most seismically volatile mountain ranges on Earth. A rigid structure, one built the way we build with brick and mortar today, would crack and collapse in a serious earthquake. The Inca walls do something else entirely. Under seismic stress, the individually shaped, interlocking blocks are able to shift slightly against one another, absorb the energy of the shockwave, and then settle back into their original position. Engineers sometimes describe this as the wall dancing. It's not a myth. It's documented seismic performance, and it explains why so many of these walls have survived 5 centuries of earthquakes that have leveled far more modern buildings in the same valley. How did they achieve that fit without iron chisels or power tools? This is where the real answer is more remarkable than any lost civilization story, because the answer is human skill, applied with staggering patience. The Inca quarried granite using harder stones, hammerstones of dense rock like quartzite, to pound and flake the surface of softer granite blocks into rough shape. Then came grinding. Using sand, water, and smaller abrasive stones, workers wore the surfaces down and tested the fit repeatedly against the neighboring block, chipping away high points, retesting, chipping again. Archaeologists have found unfinished blocks at the quarry sites near Machu Picchu, some abandoned mid-process, that show this exact technique in progress, frozen in time. It's slow. It's laborious. It would have required an extraordinary, coordinated workforce, and it did. This was a state-run project of the Inca Empire, capable of organizing thousands of workers, rotating labor through a system called MITA, in which communities across the empire owed periods of labor service to the state. That's not a fringe theory. That's the same kind of centralized labor organization that also built the more than 24,000 miles of Inca road that once connected the empire from modern-day Colombia to Chile. Now here's where the story most people never hear actually begins, because the visible city, the part in every photograph, is only about 40% of what the Inca actually built at Machu Picchu. The rest is underground, and it's the reason the site has survived at all. Machu Picchu sits on a narrow mountain saddle in one of the wettest regions of the Andes, an area that can receive well over 6 feet of rain a year. A site like that, built on a steep slope of loose soil and fractured granite, should have slid off the mountain centuries ago through landslides and erosion. It didn't, and the reason is a buried engineering system that took modern researchers decades to fully map. Beneath the terraces and plazas, Inca engineers built an extensive layered foundation, crushed stone at the base for drainage, packed gravel above that, and finer soil layered on top, each layer sized and sorted with a precision that mirrors, of all things, modern civil engineering roadbed design. Water that falls on the site doesn't pool and doesn't erode the slopes. It's channeled through more than 100 documented drainage outlets and stone-lined canals that thread beneath the buildings, guiding rainfall safely off the mountain before it can destabilize anything above. Agricultural engineers who have studied this system have called it one of the most sophisticated drainage networks built anywhere in the pre-industrial world, and it is a major reason Machu Picchu remained structurally intact through 500 years of Andean storms, while so many other sites nearby crumbled. The terraces tell the same story. They weren't just decorative, and they weren't just farmland, though they were certainly used to grow crops suited to different microclimates as the elevation changed. They were retaining structures, engineered to hold the mountainside itself together, each one layered with the same drainage logic as the foundations below the main plazas. Gravel, then soil, then topsoil, allowing water to pass through instead of building pressure behind the terrace wall. Structural engineers who have modeled these systems have noted that this layer design is remarkably close in principle to modern retaining wall engineering, worked out independently, centuries earlier, through observation and trial rather than calculation on paper. So, why does the precision of the stonework vary so much across the site? This is a real and well-documented pattern, and it's worth explaining honestly, because it has a straightforward answer that doesn't require inventing a lost civilization. Machu Picchu wasn't built all at once by a single crew. It was constructed over the course of decades, likely under multiple building phases, for different purposes. The finest, most exacting stonework is concentrated in the areas that mattered most: religious structures like the Temple of the Sun, the royal residences, the spaces tied most closely to Inca cosmology and to the emperor himself. The rougher stonework, simple field stone walls bonded with mud mortar, is found in the areas that mattered practically but not ceremonially: storage buildings, workers' housing, agricultural terracing. This isn't a mystery. It's a hierarchy, and it's one that shows up at nearly every major archaeological site in the world, from Egyptian temples to Roman villas. The people who mattered most and the gods who mattered most got the finest work. Everyone else got competent, functional construction. Skilled specialist masons were a distinct and honored class within Inca society, and the finest walls represent the absolute peak of what that specialist class could produce, not evidence of a different, older, more advanced hand at work. It's also worth addressing directly why claims about impossibly precise stonework spread so easily online, because understanding that is part of understanding the real story. Human eyes are bad at estimating what patient, skilled labor over months or years can produce. When we see a joint we can't slip a knife into, our instinct is to imagine a laser or a machine, because that's the only context in which most of us have seen that kind of precision before. But patience scales in ways intuition doesn't. Experimental archaeologists have actually replicated Inca stone-fitting techniques using only period-appropriate tools, hammerstones, sand abrasives, wooden levers, and stone mauls, and have successfully produced tight-fitting joints on smaller blocks, confirming that the technique works exactly as the archaeological record suggests. It's slow. It's demanding. It required generations of specialized, inherited craft knowledge passed from master mason to apprentice. But it is achievable by human hands, and we have physical proof of the process at the quarry sites: half-finished blocks, discarded flawed pieces, and stone tools left exactly where they were last used. There's another detail that deserves real attention here, because it's one of the most genuinely fascinating and well-supported aspects of Inca stonework. The choice of polygonal, irregular block shapes wasn't just aesthetic. Rectangular blocks concentrate stress at their corners. A straight seam under seismic load becomes a fracture line. by cutting each block with multiple, uneven angled faces that interlock uniquely with their specific neighbors. Inca masons distributed structural load across a much larger surface area per joint and made every wall functionally resistant to the kind of shearing force that destroys rectangular masonry in an earthquake. This is a genuinely sophisticated structural insight, arrived at through generations of observation in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on the planet, refined and passed down without any written engineering literature. That's not a smaller story than ancient lost civilization. It's arguably a bigger one because it's true, and because it means this knowledge belonged entirely to the people history actually credits with it. None of this is to say Machu Picchu has given up every secret. Archaeologists are still working right now to more fully map the underground water channels, to understand construction sequencing across different sections of the site, and to determine exactly how many workers were involved and over what span of years. Ongoing research using ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR laser scanning, real technology, genuinely used at the site, continues to reveal structures and pathways not visible on the surface, buried walls, additional terracing, and sections of the drainage network still being traced. That work is slow, careful, peer-reviewed, and far less dramatic than viral claims suggest, but it is steadily deepening our understanding of just how deliberately this site was engineered from the ground up. What makes Machu Picchu worth returning to, again and again, isn't a hidden message encoded in the stone by a vanished master civilization. It's the opposite. It's the fact that everything we can verify about how it was built points to something remarkable about us, that a society without metal tools, without the wheel for transport, without a written language in the form we'd recognize, organized tens of thousands of people, moved multi-ton blocks up a mountainside using ramps, rope, and human muscle, and engineered a drainage and foundation system so effective it has outperformed structures built with modern materials in the same valley. The Inca didn't need to inherit this knowledge from someone older and more advanced. They built it themselves, tested it against the mountain and the earthquakes and the rain, refined it over generations, and left behind a structure so well engineered that it's still teaching modern civil engineers something new nearly 5 centuries later. So here's the real discovery, the one that's been sitting in plain sight the whole time, hiding not because anyone buried it deliberately, but because the truth is quieter than the myth. It's not a secret written by a forgotten people who knew they were fading. It's a very human achievement, patient, communal, hard-won, and entirely explainable if you're willing to look closely enough. The wall at the bottom of Machu Picchu doesn't know something the wall at the top has forgotten. They were built by the same people, generations apart, refining a craft that was already, from the very start, extraordinary. If you want to see the quarry sites where the unfinished blocks still sit exactly as they were left, or the drainage maps that show just how far this engineering extends beneath the surface, that's where the real research is heading next, and it's worth following. Let me know in the comments which part of Machu Picchu's real engineering surprised you most, the seismic-resistant joints, the hidden drainage system beneath the terraces, or the sheer scale of the labor it took to build all of it by hand. And if you want more videos that dig into the actual, verified science behind the world's most mysterious ancient sites, subscribe, because there's a lot more buried out there worth uncovering honestly.